And then Pensacola was a sort of a no-nonsense situation. And you saw some of my logbook the other day. And I don't know, I still don't understand how I had so many, 2 or 3 of those down checks. I guess maybe they needed more warm bodies in the cockpit.
Well, some of your down checks look like they were, you know, very, very normal things. I mean, I bet when I went through pilot training, it was very common to get down checks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't get down checks...
What did you need to remove the down check? Did you need two additional checks?
You needed just one, but if you got 3 down checks in a row, the moving van came and took all of your furniture and moved you out of Texas. They used to say when I was at Laughlin that you could have a bad day, but you couldn't have a bad week. Because if you had a bad week, the moving van would come and take all your furniture. But we had about 40% failure rate and 60% success rate. But the 40% failure rate, most of those guys had never flown airplanes before, so I sort of stacked the deck by having flown out of TAC Air for all those many years. Because most of the people in my class had never even been in an airplane. And that's an awful tall order to just show up and you've never even been in an airplane.
Basically, I was in that group.
That's tough. See, that's really tough. You didn't get that many down checks. I mean, particularly with no prior experience. That's pretty impressive.
They had to take that into consideration.
But just your personality is very responsible, and I think ultimately in pilot training, before you get eliminated, if you're pretty responsible and you want to get through it, they're going to work with you. And a lot of the guys who didn't get through decided that they didn't really want to put up with whatever you had to put up with to get through it. You just kept showing up and kept trying and trying and trying, you wanted to be there, you know, unless you tried to kill the instructor every day. If the instructor repeatedly was having to assume control of the plane and recover from some sort of a dive or something. But, so how long did Pensacola last? It was about 6 or 7 months?
It was a short 4 months.
Pensacola was 4 months?
Yeah, well, we got there in, late July. And so there was August, September, October, November, December. I got my wings.
December 23rd.
23rd.
1942.
Yeah. So they were really pushing us.
That's fast. See, I started on...
I still don't remember what I was doing in the SNJs in Pensacola. I think I saw it in the logbook there.
They might have been doing some advanced maneuvering. They might have been
I wasn't doing any aerobatics or anything like that.
No, they might have been doing some sort of instrument stuff.
Get the instruments. That's why I went to Peachtree.
Oh, big Peachtree. It's a cop Peachtree right up the road here. What a small world.
That's sort of funny.
That's very funny.
That's how I got my, and we were flying Howard's. Was a very civilian looking plane, you know.
What time frame were you talking about for the instrument?
I went to Peachtree when I was getting ready to go to transports. That was after I got out of doing
primary flight training. Okay, so I'm with you so far. When you finished Pensacola on December 23rd, 1942.
Yeah, then I went to Norfolk, Virginia. I went on leave for 15 days or something, and then I went to Norfolk, Virginia. I think I went by train.
And how long of a stint did you get to do there?
Well, we were there for like 3 weeks waiting for our orders because the Martin people
the PBM factory shut down?
Screwed up so much there that they had to just get rid of us, you know, and so they figured they probably could use teaches to advantage in doing primary instruction.
So had they not done that, your first assignment out of pilot training would have been to fly a PBM?
Yes, sir.
And what was it, did the PBM ever get built later
Oh,
on?
yeah, sure.
What did it look like?
Well, we went to school a couple of days, and they had backup systems, and they said, well, if this doesn't work, you know, then you use the backup, and the backup doesn't going to work.
You use your parachute.
Yeah, I think the PBM-3 or something it wasn't that good an airplane as the PBM-1.
Was it a 2-engine or a 4-engine? Or?
Well, they were both twin engine.
So was it similar in size to like a Beech 18? Or was it closer to like a DC-3?
Well, you know, it's a flying boat. It's
Like a Catalina?
well, yeah, but it wasn't. They didn't make any amphibians. It was just a
Straight seaplane.
Just straight seaplane, and it was
Search and rescue?
probably, but they used them down in South America a lot. I don't know why, but I guess there were squadrons around Cuba or someplace. And so I never had the opportunity to. We got our orders one day after we had celebrated the night before for a good or bad change, and it turned out it was a pretty good change. We got Los Alamitos, and I went to the ship store and told the lady there that if she could find Los Alamitos in this atlas, I would buy the atlas. And so she got in there, and she found it. And,
That's a long train ride from Norfolk to Los Alamitos.
no. Well, I guess I flew out there somewhere or other. I think I went home on leave again for 10 or 15 days.
Let me see if I'm in the right month here. You got to Norfolk probably like the end of January of 43?
Yeah, it was, actually I can tell you, it was in January, and it was around the 10th of the month, it was the beginning of January, and
Waited for a month or two?
we went to the movies, and
That's great.
went to the bar.
When did you get out to Los Alamitos?
13th of February.
13th of February, you're in Los Alamitos.
Right.
And
That was interesting. I went on TWA, I think. I went by and I visited with Uncle Jim in Ashtabula, Ohio.
That's
He
pretty neat.
was on a construction job there.
That's pretty neat.
And then I only stayed like a day. I had enough time in travel to get out to California. So they went with me to where were we in the World Series last
Cleveland?
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Ashtabula is right on one of the lakes there, Lake Erie, I guess it is.
Well, Cleveland's on Lake Michigan.
No, Cleveland isn't on Lake Michigan.
Sure it is.
No.
Yeah. It is.
No, I don't think so. It's on.
It's on Lake Erie.
It's on Lake Erie. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So we took the train from Ashtabula, and Jim and his new wife, or his only wife, they were living there. And I don't think he took me down to the plant. Usually when I went to visit him, like in California, when he was building those buildings out there, he took me on the job, it was so interesting. But, so we went into Cleveland, and we had a nice dinner in Cleveland, and then they took me out, I don't know whether I went in a cab or what, out to the airport in Cleveland. And I caught a plane to, I think the TWA plane. I went to Chicago, and then we went down to Kansas City.
Now I wanted to correct myself because I just flew from Chicago to New York 2 weeks ago, and I remember one of the trips was really sunny, I mean, the whole northern half of the U.S. was perfectly sunny, no clouds. And now I recall specifically, taking off out of Chicago, and on the other side of Lake Michigan is Detroit, because we flew right over Detroit. But then we cut down over Cleveland. We were over Lake Erie.
Yeah,
That's right.
Well,
So you went from, what jogged my memory was when you said you went from Cleveland to Chicago, because that's, up west.
it's a short run.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know, it was on like Mother's Day or something. Anyway, I caught a plane out of I guess I had a reservation. And it was a 2 o'clock departure out of Chicago. I'm sure that was not O'Hare.
It was probably Midway or...
Midway, yeah, Midway.
So to go, you eventually need to get to Los Alamitos.
Yeah, but actually they flew me down to
Out of Chicago?
out of Chicago. We went down to Kansas City, which is just sort of south of
Right.
and then we kept going, and I don't remember exactly which cities we stopped at.
Maybe Salt Lake City or something.
Oh no, we weren't. TWA never really did the northern sector. They all blamed all of that on United.
Maybe Albuquerque or something?
Yeah, that's true. Probably.
Albuquerque and then cut to the mountains?
Yeah, we landed at Los Angeles, but and then we had to take a sort of a fly-by-night outfit from Los Angeles. Oh no, we landed in Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty hot city.
Yeah, in fact, I fly over that airport all the time. It's out on Final Approach. It's east of LA, and it's out on Final Approach, and Burbank is right there, and it's a big, it's a big conflict there because it's right there competing with LA.
Well, yeah, I never did really see it when we went to visit Gracie. And,
Yeah, it's
it's
right there in the middle of all the activity.
yeah.
So when you got
Anyway,
to,
so I had to change, and I took a small plane. I took another DC-3 or something.
from Burbank down
From
to...
Burbank down to Long Beach.
Mhm.
And Long Beach, it's not much of an airport.
No.
And then I called up Los Alamitos, and I think they sent me a
Transport.
transportation.
So how long were you at Los Alamitos as a flight instructor?
Well, I was there for probably no more than about 8 or 9 months. It was a very, very fun thing. I kept flying the Admiral Byrd's airplane, SNJ. It was 26966. And he raised hell when he came to operations one day, and he just wanted to get his foot back in the door to be a pilot. He was like a general or something.
Yeah.
And he raised hell because I always flew his plane after the day he raised hell, and said, look, we need to use all these airplanes, including mine, to get these guys some flight time. And,
That's
boy,
good.
that's great.
Hey.
So I take all my cross countries on 26966.
That's great. That's awesome.
And I did enough. I always like to go cross countries.
So you train the students during the week and then do cross countries on the weekend?
Well, yeah, your days off, or it didn't even have to be your days off. If you weren't working in the afternoon, you could go out on the SNJ or whatever we had available.
That's great. That's the way it is today.
In Hutchinson, Kansas, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but they had some beat-up planes that came off carriers in the Atlantic. And that was like the SBD I flew. That was in Hutchinson, Kansas. And I just supposedly pointed to the airspeed when they told me to.
The blindfold cockpit check.
I wasn't cheating, really.
Is that your blindfold cockpit check?
Yeah. What they do is they have cardboard and a pair of goggles and they put it on. Yeah.
Not when you're actually going to fly for real.
No. But that was, I mean, that thing was like a big truck.
Oh, it's a big plane. It's a lot bigger than an SNJ.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's probably got a lot of armor plate on it too.
I would guess that it probably weighs 50% more than an SNJ.
Yeah, well, an SNJ is an efficient plane, and an SBD is
like an A-10 kind of thing. It's just like
a tank, you know. But when I finally brought that, I'll get back just a minute. When I finally brought it in for landing, and I flew it up at about, it had dive flaps, I had all those things working, and when I finally brought it back to Hutchinson and landed it, an SNJ you can really dump in too, but this thing was like lead, you know. It came in and I had the right airspeed, I guess, and I sort of flared, and then I started to get ready to descend, and then I just kept pulling the nose up. When I hit down, of course that was the right way to land that plane anyway, because you got to catch the hook on the tail.
Yeah.
So it really jarred my teeth.
That's the way Navy landing is supposed to do.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right.
That airplane would have been scared if you greased it on.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I reported to Los Alamitos, and that was like a country club, really. Very nice. Everybody was filling out paperwork. And that's where I met George. I met George went out there.
And
He was an instructor there, and he came in with a commission because he already had his pilot's license.
Is he the one that had the Bonanza?
Yeah, sure. And I was telling Kara, I think, that
That's neat.
when I was working for American, and it was shortly after the war, I started working for them in '48. And so when I got to town, I was on the order to San Diego.
That's great. That's awesome.
Called up George, and he said, "Hey, let's go flying, you know, at lunchtime." So it took like 2 or 3 hours for lunch.
That's great.
And so we met for lunch, and I think he picked me up wherever I was coming from, I guess down to the airport. And then when we were in the middle of lunch, he said, "Oh, I'm going to call down there and tell him to get the plane out of the hangar." So it was I never liked that. I mean, that thing didn't look like it should fly good.
A V-tail Bonanza?
Yeah. So, and we went up to Oceanside, California, which is about halfway between San Diego or Lindbergh Field and LAX. And we shoot landings up there. But
where'd you take off out of?
Out of Lindbergh.
Wow, because that, I guess it wasn't that crowded, but now it's
Yeah. But George is always funny. I thought he's such a nice guy to pal around with, because he said, "Okay, I'm going to tell him to get it out, and we'll be down there, and we'll finish up our lunch."
That's great. I remember you telling me that about 20 years ago, thinking how neat it would be to own a plane and be able to pull out of the hangar and go fly around at lunchtime.
So, anyway,
and on a daily basis, you were just doing the same thing that you had basically been a student and you were just being an instructor in the same type of training program that you had been
Yeah.
a student in.
Yeah, which makes sense, because if you got passed through it and got your wings, well, of course the PBY thing really didn't. Oh, well, it did. It panned out because I was working with the PB2Y in the VR2.
But you didn't go from Los Alamitos to VR2, did you?
No, I didn't, because I was at another bunch of, see, they were continually closing the primary instruction places because they were afraid of the Japs
Japanese
coming
attacking.
over and attacking the
Primary cadets.
cadets.
That would not be a very good dogfight at 0 against a guy on his initial solo. It'd be his initial solo and his final solo. So tell me about going from Los Alamitos over to, I guess, Hutchinson, Kansas? Is that the next?
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, it was sort of interesting. They were disbanding Los Alamitos. So they signed us all up for ferry flights. And I'll do this quickly, but it was sort of a long drawn-out thing. I had a plane that I was going to take to Kansas City. And we flew in like a big group. Like we might have 10 airplanes. They didn't have to be all in one big formation, but we started and we were following the same flight plan. And we had to go down to Phoenix, and we stopped at Luke Field,
I just was there day before yesterday.
You went Luke?
We flew right over Luke. I mean,
right.
it's out west of Sky Harbor
Right.
in Phoenix.
Yeah, okay. Well, we planned to, and I was in a three plane group, and what did I have? I had I guess must have been just a regular Stearman. And we landed at Luke, and it was a little late in the day, and we went and had dinner and all, and then finally the next day, I guess I slept through it, but we had a horrible windstorm overnight at Luke.
Very rare for Phoenix.
Yeah, but anyway, we all got up. I mean, I didn't oversleep or anything, but we weren't leaving that early the next day. And my plane was up on its nose against a P-40. And my plane had some damage done to the fuselage. So
Showstopper.
that just put me out of the game. So I had fun there, though.
How long did you end up getting stuck there as a result of that windstorm?
Well, I'll tell you, like 3 or 4 weeks, because what they do, they had they flew down some mechanics to take the good parts off some of the planes and put them on the other planes that weren't too badly damaged.
Cannibalize them.
And my plane was just done, it was out, and so I had to, they had this pie wagon that they sent from Los Alamitos to Luke with 2 or 3 mechanics in it. Changing wings and changing stabilizers.
Wow.
And then the fun part was, though, that I had the duty of test fly on the planes after they glued them all together.
That doesn't sound real safe.
No, we didn't have any TIM airplanes. So I just go up there and fool around and make sure that the plane seemed like it was airworthy.
I hope you had a parachute on.
Oh yeah, of course.
Jeez.
And so then we got out of there, and then we had to, I didn't know how we were supposed to get back. and they told me, sent a message that we're supposed to drive in the pie wagon back to LA, back to
Los Alamitos.
And that was, we started like 6 o'clock at night, and we drove all night. We went through here. Where's that big place that the sea is, Salton Sea, is it?
Yeah, probably
It's
so.
300 feet below sea level.
Right. That is very fascinating.
Yeah. But anyway, and we saw these, can't think of the name of it, what kind of a animal they have in Phoenix there.
Oh, like
Gila
Gila
monster.
monster.
Gila monster. I don't remember what they look like, but at night, we were driving all night long, and we didn't get back until the next day, which was Sunday, and we did make it back around 3 o'clock in the afternoon at Los Alamitos, but we were really,
Demoralizing thing.
and then I wasn't going anyplace because I just didn't have the opportunity to finish the ferry.
So what ended up happening?
Well, then I just waited there until I got orders, Los Alamitos, because we were not training anymore. And most of the planes were already gone.
Mm-hmm. So how long do you think you hung out at Los Alamitos?
Well, I was there, like as I said, from February 13th, I think,
Mm-hmm.
until August, end of August of 42.
Mm-hmm.
And,
But if they weren't closing down Los Alamitos because of the Japanese, how long would that training assignment have lasted normally?
well, it's hard to tell because, as I say, they were in the mode to close down anything close to the coast.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And they sent me to Hutchinson, and I was there not that many months. And I took 15 more days to
That's great.
leave. And I was always riding the train, the Santa Fe, I guess, back to, I caught the New York Central, and I'd be in New York for 15 days.
That's great.
And then going back, I had to go through Chicago, because if you came in on the New York Central, then you had to take a cab or something over from the New York Central terminal to the Santa Fe terminal in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty complicated.
Pretty far. It's across Chicago.
It's not close at all. And when we got married, I had to meet Mom at the railroad station because she came on the railroad.
The New York Central. Or the Santa Fe.
I guess it was New York, Pennsylvania, or was it New York Central? I think Pop came in on a plane. Came in on an American plane.
American Airlines.
Yeah. He enjoyed flying.
Your Pop or Mom's
My
Pop?
Pop. So, anyway, so I went to Hutchinson, and Hutchinson got torn up too, and that's where I was talking earlier, that the B-24, the Navy version, had a straight
Right, just a straight vertical fin.
And I forget what the designation was for the plane, because we just followed our own designations.
Mm-hmm. So it might have been
B-24. It was
You guys would have. What did you use it for? For bombing or for transport or?
no, we used it for bombing. I don't know.
You didn't have.
It
Yeah.
might have been we're dropping bombs on submarines or
Yeah.
something.
Very possible.
Anyway, so I enjoyed being in. And I guess that fall, must have been the fall of 42. They had a lot of those.
In the fall of 43, you graduated from flight school in December of 42.
Oh, okay. So this was 43. What I was saying is that the Midwestern cities like Hutchinson,
Wichita.
a lot of those cities, and even Ottumwa, Iowa, which was a base that was eventually wiped out too.
Wiped out by what?
They didn't need any more training, you know.
Oh, okay. Didn't get hit by a tornado or anything.
Oh, no.
They just closed it down.
Oh, right, yeah, but I told you, I think, more recently that about the night flight, remember they went over with snow on the ground to Ottumwa, and then
From Hutchinson?
from Hutchinson, and it was very difficult finding the airport even.
And you had your parachute rigger was your
Yeah.
passenger?
Right, yeah, I was.
Was he your lucky charm?
Gave me moral support.
But you knew if you had to jump out the wing.
He's the one that made that cover. It's waterproof cover, and it's lined with parachute material.
Parachute silk.
Yeah, I mean it's not silk. It's sort of
Nylon?
I think it's good cotton or something. Anyway, and then it has snaps on. You know, and that was one of the controversial things that George Burnett and I argued about. I couldn't see paying $25 for what the heck did they call them? A plotting board. And if you're going to fly off a carrier, you better have your plotting board.
Or else you may not find the boat.
It's strictly an insurance policy, because if you don't and you don't know how to use it, you're going to be in the water in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Well, something I wanted to just point out real quick. A lot of the Delta pilots flew on and off aircraft carriers.
Oh, is that right?
And they have told me that when they tested the stress of Navy pilots in modern day combat, the amount of stress measured by breathing and heartbeat in a dogfight, in an actual air-to-air combat situation during Desert Storm, was very mild compared to the stress of just finding the aircraft carrier at the end of the dogfight and landing. So the dogfight, shooting missiles and bullets at each other and pulling 6 and 7 Gs was not a big deal compared with trying to find the boat and land on the boat at night. That was by far the most stressful part of the
They had a
flight.
simple procedure, but it was, after you've been shot at for 2 or 3 hours.
Gosh.
Just without going into details, we had point option. And they didn't give you the latitude and longitude of point option until you were ready to take off the carrier. And they give you a current one right there. You have the chalkboard and hold it up, and you better copy that down.
And then you knew what maneuvers the boat was going to do in the meantime, so you'd be able to find it.
You didn't care what they were going to do, because
they'd be at point option at the time that you were supposed to land?
No, they would give you a position from point option
where they would be when you were
where they were, so they didn't have to be restricted to getting over here or getting over here.
And they could speak in the clear, because
Well,
the enemy wouldn't know where point option is.
Yeah, that's right. And that was a really clever
That was, because in the war that I was in, we had a radio in the 141 that electronically would change channels every second. And so you would have to have your radio, and they would have to have their radio, changing channels. You didn't do it manually, it was done by a computer, but they would be changing channels back and forth once a second, so that when you were telling them where you were and they were telling you where they were, or they were giving you some other piece of information that was important, the enemy wouldn't be able to listen, because the enemy would only ever hear half of what was being said, because it's on two different frequencies. But that was complicated, because sometimes your radio and their radio weren't synchronized, and so you couldn't hear them, they couldn't hear you, and the only thing it did is create a problem for us. It didn't really create a problem for them. That was pretty clever. Well, I'll tell you what, let's finish just the training squadrons, and then tomorrow morning we'll talk about the flying boats stuff.
Okay.
Did all the training stuff occur before all the flying boat stuff?
Yeah, actually, I went to Norman, Oklahoma.
After Hutchinson, Kansas?
After Hutchinson, Kansas. And I wasn't there that long, maybe half a year or so. And I'd have to put it on a piece of paper and see. Well, I mean, I could look at my book, my logbook. But then I got orders to go into transports.
Great.
And in that, whatever year it was, in September, I spent the full month of September at FWA or something.
Fort Worth?
Fort Worth. At the American Airlines with the instructors for the R5 4Ds.
That's great.
And that's where I met Cliff Haney. He was my instructor.
That would have had to be September of...
44, I guess. Must have been 44.
How long did you spend in Hutchinson?
Oh, maybe 9 months or something.
Okay, because that would add up to the fall of 44. So really, the first time you ever flew anything other than a small plane was the end of 44.
44?
Right. I mean, the rest of the time, you had never flown DC-3 or a PB-2Y or anything multi-engine heavy type of plane until after all of your instructing.
Yeah, right.
Is that true?
That's true.
So, Los Alamitos, Hutchinson, Kansas, and Norman, Oklahoma were the 3 training bases where you were the instructor.
Right.
And Philadelphia, Navy Yard, and Pensacola were the 2 bases where you were a student.
Right. That's right.
And then tomorrow, after we get a great night's sleep, we'll start out September time frame of 44 and talk about flying the PBY Catalina, the PB-2Y Coronado, the Goonie Bird, the R4D, and
yeah, I'm trying to figure out just right now the checkout in the DC-3 was I guess it was 44, September 44. It was a full month.
that's great. So the first big airplane you learned in was the DC-3?
Yeah.
Before the PBY and the PB-2Y and all the rest of the
Well, I went
seaplanes?
through, my major was in Pensacola, was in PBYs. And, I really didn't have that much stick time on it, but I did have stick time on it.
Which is why they sent you to fly the PDM, because your major was...
Yeah, well, our major was P-boats.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. So that's pretty interesting, because basically what it boils down to is an abbreviated version of what they do right now. It's just they take more time to do it right now. But they do all your primary training, then they do all your specialty training towards the end. But they don't do a lot of it. And then they send you out and you go get sort of on-the-job training while you're flying your C-141 or your PBM or whatever it is. So that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
right.
you were at that point branded as a transport pilot. So you
Right.
weren't going to go from
And
Hutchinson.
actually, I went from, after I finished in Beecham Field,
In Fort Worth?
in Fort Worth, I was transferred to Olathe, Kansas, which was one of the transport squadron's bases. Olathe itself was actually a primary training base at one time.
But not at that time.
No, they converted it to, and I had some loggings of flights out of Olathe.
In a Stearman or an SNJ?
No, in
R4D?
R4D, yeah.
So you didn't fly any Stearman flights out of Olathe, Kansas?
I don't believe so.
That's interesting.
No, this was because I was after I took my month of learning how to fly the R4D, then I was branded, I was going to be flying R4Ds.
Right.
And it ended up I was flying them in the Philippines, but,
Right.
which was fun.
That's great. Well, perfect timing. It's flashing that the tape's done. So what I'm going to do is, we're all done for tonight.
Do you have any more tapes, or?
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this little one onto the new big one that I bought, and then tomorrow we'll just reuse this little one, and then I'll have one master VHS, and then I'll make copies for all of...
Oh, we've made a lot better time than I thought we were going to make.
Well, because you really were well organized, and you had all your thoughts. You have a good mind. I mean, you have all that stuff. I don't even know that I could go through my Air Force career that well to know months. I guess I could. I'd probably have to spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, well, it's, I think we trying to figure out when I got to, I didn't get to, what year I got to VR2 out in Alameda. It was probably the fall of 44.
Right,
Late in the fall or early January of 45.
right.
And, I didn't fly that many months on all of that out of Alameda.
Right.
And then, when I was in Honolulu, as I had mentioned, I went to talk to one of the yeomen at the Bupers pack or whatever, and said, look, I want to go to VR13.
Mm-hmm.
And they guys said, you're not going to like it down there. And I said, I know, but I have friends down there, and they've got a lot of photograph records. And we're going to have fun down there. And,
Drinking all the Pepsi. Drinking
yeah.
all the Coca-Cola.
So it was sort of anticlimactic with that it was 45, and that's when the war ended in August or whatever.
That's good. I'm into anticlimactic stuff when it comes to getting blown out of the sky.
Yeah. But,
What's really neat is that I've had so many Delta captains that have told me almost verbatim what you told me, and that is, if you are very excited about a nice, uneventful flight, then you will have a wonderful career at Delta Airlines. If you are happy to go to work and have nothing abnormal happen to you all day long, and do that day after day, you will do well.
Don't that MD-11 wish they had a routine flight.
Yeah.
That thing really, that going to the hangar and seeing that plane, I've seen pictures of it. I've seen beautiful pictures of them flying.
Is that not a massive airplane?
Yeah. No, I'm saying on the TV, they
Right.
show massive they show picture after picture of of a beautiful MD-11 flying with all of the Swiss colors and stuff. And to think that that thing could be trashed, that is really terrible.
It's like a tank. I mean, it's so big. It's so heavy.
And it's like a, you know, if you go into any kind of a factory and you see a very important machine and it's massive and it does all of this making things or something, it's very impressive. And it's just like the airplanes, they do great things as long as they keep going. But you know, complacence, I've read it and you've read it, and complacence is one of the enemies of pilots.
But you know, if they found scorch marks on the co-pilot's seat,